We've been discussing Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. And one of the things that came up in our discussions, we were looking for books that might help us as Christians living in a secular world, working for secular organizations and companies. How do we stay in our values? How do we walk the walk of what we profess versus just professing it? So looking for books on how to help us as Christians work and live in a secular world. Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, opening up the conversation. Is this a good book to recommend for that journey?
The book, Dare to Lead, covers a number of interesting topics. And one of them is the idea between being an armor leader versus a more daring leader. And so to the point of how well does that kind of line up with the Christian faith and the Christian values? It's a very interesting question because I haven't given a whole lot of thought about this. This is just purely a reactive response to the question. Obviously, easy to say that being a more daring leader seems to fit quite well with Christian values. However, sometimes I also think about the armor leader's approach. Is there a way to use it with the Christian values as well? Or another way to rephrase that is, are there any conflicts running a business in a more as an armor leader, and yet still able to keep the Christian values? So that is something that I've been thinking about. I don't have all the answers, obviously. So maybe you guys can take a step at that as well.
Thank you, Simon. So, like the book, when you think about Brené Brown's book, the questions, does the values in the book coincide with faith? And first off, the book doesn't cite any Bible verses or anything to that. So the book is written from more of a research standpoint, and it doesn't necessarily embed any Christian values or any Bible passages or anything like that into the book. But as you read through the narratives and you're looking at the different lessons from a business perspective. So when you're looking at the values associated in the book, especially when you look at the values from a daring leader perspective, they're more in line with what you would expect a Christian to behave, right? So there is that congruence. And while it's not over, while the book is 100% preachy, it talks about, showing up for people, being vulnerable, understanding your employees, displaying empathy. So when you look at all of these different facets of mantra for Daring to Lead, and you look at how that connects with teachings from the Bible, especially from the daring leadership side, there's a lot of alignment. And you can take some of the principles from the Bible and apply them straight into this book, and you can take some of the principles from this book and apply them straight and see them in the Bible. So as a Christian and as someone who has enjoyed this book, I think that anyone who's walking down the Christian faith and they find this book and they want to be a daring leader, I see very little conflict in Christianity and maintaining your Christian faith by following the daring leadership side of the equation. Armor is a whole other story. From the daring perspective, I see a lot of alignment there. And Jeanette, what are your thoughts?
Now, I think Dare to Lead by Brené Brown is a fantastic secular book for Christians journeying in a secular world. I think, Edwin, you had mentioned as well, it talks a lot about service, and we put service before ourselves. And I think that there's so much that she asks of us in this book to clarify what are our values. And living in a distracted world, it's so easy to take on this multiplicity of values and missions and, stuff. And she says that what are one or two values? Because anything more than that can be very distracting and difficult to prioritize. And she asks in this book as well are we just professing our values or are we living our values? And through this book, you really take that journey of what are your values, how to live in your values and not only profess your values, and what to do when things get tough. because it's easy to profess and be in your values when things are great, there are no challenges, but work, life, hardships, bearing the cross. How do we bear the cross with grace? And I think that's what daring to be vulnerable really means. Taking off the armor, Simon, as you talked about how we put on that armor of self-protection, which generally turns into judgment, gossip, controlling, anger, all those negative emotions. When we walk that life of Christ, we put down the armor, right? We are being asked to put down that armor. And I think it was really refreshing to read a take on how to do that in this book, Dare to Lead. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think that there is so much in this book that helps me stay on that course, be brave, choose courage over comfort, because we live in a world where you can buy comfort, you can choose comfort if you have that privilege. But it's so much more rewarding in a faith-based choosing the courage to be in your Christian values wherever you are, whatever values that you have, and to stay strongly in them when you are being challenged. She calls it the arena, in those dark moments of life, difficult conversations as a leader. How do you maintain your sense of who you are and who you're meant to be when you're always in this culture now having these sort of alternate ways of being? So no, I think this is a great book. I would highly recommend Dare to Lead by Brené Brown for any Christian who is thinking, how do I journey in the secular world, staying true to my faith, and not only staying true to your faith, how do I firmly root and grow stronger and more courageously in my faith?
I wonder if there's actually a similar situation back in the days when Jesus was teaching everyone, and there's a group of so-called scholars back then. It's almost like they are bringing a more armor leadership type of approach, and whereas Jesus is more about daring the leadership approach. I can see the similarities back then and how Jesus was able to handle those situations perfectly, according to the Bible, right? And that sort of got me thinking as well, is being a Christian, if I am in an environment where everybody else is more armor up, how should I behave? Can I survive even in that sort of environment? And what should I do? Should I also armor up, or can I continue with a more daring leadership approach? Something to think about if you are in that kind of situation. I think this book will definitely give you some ideas, some insights to how to navigate that kind of difficult situations and environments.
I also think in the realm of shame, Brené Brown is a shame expert, and from a psychological research perspective. And in the Bible, we are asked to turn the other cheek, to let go, to release, don't return anger with anger. And I think if we embody those words, there's also a struggle when you're in a situation where shame is placed on you, or you manifesting shame in your own psyche or body, what to do with that. What are your thoughts, Simon and Edwin, that there is help with bearing that cross of shame and humiliation as well? Because those are real things that can really impede growth. It could impede forward motion in both the work world and personal world. And how do we equip ourselves with enough resilience and courage so that we don't put on the armor? Because shame and humiliation, you tend to reach for the armor of self-protection, which generally becomes about judgment. We could veer on the side of hatred and vindictive qualities. Like, how do we stay firmly rooted in our faith and Christian values when we live in a secular world where shame and blame and all of those negative emotions are being cast at us?
Well, yeah, and the book goes into talking about like perfectionism and how perfectionism can be for an organization from a leadership perspective. But then as we look at, we want to be innovative and we want to allow people to take risks, cultivate culture that enables people to take risks and feel comfortable speaking up in meetings and contributing. Right? It's all about the contribution and creating at the end of the day. And so as we look at applying the principles in a secular world, you also want to get the most out of people, and you want to help people grow and develop and challenge them, is more in line with successful outcomes for the business because you're creating an environment where people can take risks and take chances.
And I think the
Yeah.
book goes into empathy as well, too. And how do we cultivate empathy in an armored leadership world as well? And I think that, yeah, addressing a lot of those fine points of number one, what is empathy? How to stay in empathy when we have stones being cast at us. So that's an interesting take as well. I find that this is a very helpful read if you are journeying to reach for empathy and compassion more than you are striving for all the other things that our society and culture puts before us.
I think we could definitely draw a number of connections between some of the topics that were discussed in the book and the Bible, right? As you talk about shame, you talk about empathy and a number of other things. And I start to, recall a lot of the things I read in the Bible. And I say, oh yeah, I can see the connection there, and I can see how, or what Jesus did to encourage a lot of those things. I think this book warrants maybe a third read just to make those connections much more stronger. And yeah, I think definitely this is a great book that I hope everybody gets a chance to read it.
I want to close this segment with a couple of small passages from the book. Brené Brown says, "Our values should be so crystallized in our minds, so infallible, so precise and clear and unassailable that they don't feel like a choice. They are simply a definition of who we are in our lives." And she states, integrity is choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy, and it's practicing your values, not just professing them. I find that in itself encapsulates our journey as Christians. I think that, practicing our values, knowing what our values are and having them fully embodied, mind, body, and spirit, so that they don't feel like a choice. They feel like an act of will over and over again, and that we choose that courage over comfort, because we do live in a world and a society. We all live in or near urban centers in major cities. And so there's so much that is fun, fast, or easy that is put in front of us every single day. And we also live in a very distracted world. So to close, Simon and Edwin, what are your thoughts in that sense? Do you find it hard to keep navigating that path of faith in this distracted world?
I mean, yes, there is there's a negation with respect to morals and values. Things that were taboo even 5, 10 years ago, now mainstream. They're now popularized, and some of the stuff that even 20, 30, 40 years ago that would have been looked at badly is popularized, and it's almost sometimes put on a pedestal. I think that we are living in a world, unregrettably, especially in the United States, with a declining moral fabric. Think about it. The United States is very close to re-electing someone who has perjured themselves, who's lied to grand juries, who's assaulted females, and all of this is now it's collaborated, it's collaborated. There's videotapes, there's reportings, and we're saying to ourselves, be the leader of the free world again, even though we know that you're not a honest human being. We have a situation in Russia where their leader, Vladimir Putin, rewrote the constitution to allow him to be the leader for life. Same thing happened in China, where they said, we're not going to even pretend to be a democracy anymore. We're just going to allow the leader, I think his name is Chen or Zhen, but he can now be the leader for life. So we're seeing countries and people moving away towards the Christian values and legitimate principles in place.
Yeah, for sure. There are challenges being Christians, and we're trying to navigate the current situation or the changing situations around Canada, US, and around the world. But I think the whole idea here is being brave. right? And if this is the value that we believe in, then I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. We need to stick with what we feel is right, and the rest we'll leave it up to God to lead, right? Let's not forget God is still in control. So there are things we may find difficult, challenging, and or even worse. Just like the Bible said, we as Christians sometimes can be looked at as sheep in a world where there's a lot of wolves around. So I think we should just continue to be brave. And again, the book Dare to Lead is great. Give us a different perspective, more a secular perspective. And I think combining that with the Bible, I think it will definitely help us to be even a better Christian.
And just to clean this up, President of China, Xi Jinping, he's been the president since 2013, and then he was the vice president from 2008. So he's been in office for almost 20 years.
A lot of the world leaders are centering themselves as godlike figures. So that becomes quite a dangerous prophecy or prophesizing of what they see for the world and what they are enacting. So to close, Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, I think we all agree is a very helpful book navigating this world of much change, conflict, and uncertainty. For me, it requires us to dig deeper, to dig our heels in, more strongly connect to courage and our brave resilience to rise up and to stay firmly rooted, even more firmly rooted, if that's possible, in our values, and to continue walking our walk. So Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, thumbs up.